The simple beauty of waking up before sunrise just feels like a rite of passage. You know, some people just don't really understand unless if you wake up really early before sunrise and just go out and see just the way, you know, the light interplays with the landscape in front of you. So today I'm on location here at Marianist Nature Preserve, and it's my first visit. Actually, for the start of the visit, I checked out this nice, beautiful kind of dugout prairie land and meadow tract of habitat, and it's got this nice dugout water kind of pond situated in the middle of it. But it's a beautiful way to see the sunrise right over the highway there, and I took some gorgeous landscape shots of the sunrise in different varying degrees here, doing some kind of HDR brackets as well, and then trying some single static images as So you can see from this first image here, I really kept it deeply silhouetted on the foreground there, but I put emphasis with most of the frame being filled with the different clouds that kind of surrounded this kind of sun and as it rose in the sky. And you can see in the second one, I had the same idea there, showing kind of the negative space coming from the left side where the sun was rising. Now in this next one, this is probably my favorite. This is a bracketed one of two separate images, and it just shows a nice kind of interplay of the foreground with the water reflected in the early morning light. And here's a vertical one showing kind of similar details there, but showing some more tree branches in the foreground that help frame the sunrise in the sky. And this one kind of plays on that little detail a little bit more using a telephoto lens, and it frames the sunrise when it was already pretty high in the sky at this point, but I liked how it turned out anyways. And this one shows more of the golden hour kind of bathing light as it rose in the sky. Alright, so to start off for the day, early morning here, I did a sunrise landscape photo, or a series of photos at least, at a nice dugout, kind of a gravelly kind of dugout prairie habitat. It's kind of interesting. This is like just this giant crater, and I was reading the signage, and it was just kind of fascinating to hear how old it is here at the Bergamo Center. How it's just this nice little prairie habitat, really. And so lots of red-winged blackbirds and several different kinds of kind of wrens and sparrows from the looks of it were floating about all within that little crater there. And there's some winding trails that kind of weave in and out of the crater itself that take you closer to the pond, a smallish kind of water dugout there in the center of the whole entire thing. But yeah, I just stood on the kind of the outskirts of it on the edge, and I was just simply taking some sunrise photos there. And it's a very beautiful spot. Got a lot of different kind of angles, working different things. I did as wide as 16 mil, and then I also did 35 millimeters as well. The 35 ones in particular are interesting just because I had the sun with a kind of like what they call a framing device. So I had some silhouetted tree branches that were really close to me in the foreground, just off the side of the trail before the lens, right in front of it. And I had those kind of basically framing the sun a little bit there. And those were nice kind of cropped in feel. In all the images pretty much I underexposed the foreground at the horizon line. And I made that very, very small sliver at the bottom of the frame, both in the vertical and horizontal. But I found the the horizontal images I feel like worked a lot more effectively, especially when detailing that water feature in the middle, in the center of the prairie. Just making, because when you use a wide or horizontal composition, obviously it's going to emphasize the kind of the size and the length of every element in the scene there. So, and that's kind of what I was going for. I wanted to emphasize the water detail, and of course just the wide, expansive view that was laid before me there in the camera as well. But yeah, I got some nice images of that. About halfway through, it was almost an afterthought. I should have put it on from the get-go, but I remembered to put on a circular polarizer filter. And in this case, pretty much the only singular function of that would be to further deepen and saturate the colors, particularly of the sky, which is the main colors there. And it was nice to see, at least with this particular morning here. I guess I got kind of lucky with it. I feel like it added to the compositions I made in the photos. But the clouds just seem to really kind of be almost like brushed away to the right side, and just leaving that whole entire left side of the sky, which I emphasize a lot, especially in the first couple images. Just left that sky pretty much blank besides the sun. And I feel like that made a nice duality, instead of having kind of like the clouds and the sun compete for each other in the sky there all at once. But so it made a nice little kind of visual balance in the images, which I'm quite fond of. And I feel like it's going to turn out pretty well overall, this set of images. Some of them are also bracketed, just simply exposing for the foreground if I wanted to include that. Specific images would include the ones where I had the water. That's ones where the only ones really where I emphasize and both expose that detail of the frame there. And then the other bracket really was just the sky, and just to make more, pump out more colors essentially. But I did a couple series of brackets there, just using pretty much two. I think I did one where I did 3 brackets, but yeah, they got turned out pretty well, I think, overall, and I'm really happy about that. It's finally nice to get a sunrise where I don't quite feel as rushed. But as you can tell now, it's very cloudy behind me here. The sun's hidden behind clouds, which works out pretty well. That means I can keep photographing the rest of the morning here at the Bergamo Center, and so far I'm really enjoying it. It's a nice, peaceful morning to myself, and look forward to some of the other images we may create, such as maybe some spring ephemerals, or might even switch out to the telephoto and do some birds. In particular, I've been seeing some eastern towhees that are really getting up close to me, like off the side of the trail, and I'm really kind of eager to finally get a photo of them at least. So, but yeah, I'm really enjoying my day so far here, and I look forward to what's to come here.
One of the motifs of my work is just finding different kinds of trees that have, personalities with them. So I found this one to be very expressive, as you can tell. And I tried this really up close, kind of wide angle image, just really, detailing the base of the bark and the tree structures there. And so from here, I just checked out there's a myriad of hiking trails. Most of them are only about a mile or so in length. They're not too big at all, but I very much enjoy just check out these different woodland habitats that's here. There's also a very small woodland fen that includes some wetwoods, and there's different kinds of prairie habitat. Just very easy-going trails. As you can tell, there's lots of signage here that makes visiting them very, very easy and worthwhile, and you're not really likely to get lost as well. And there's also a myriad of different kinds of flowers. Here's some cultivated daffodils that I found just situated by the parking lot, and there's the wetwoods with some buttercups that I will visit later on. After that successful sunrise shoot and checking out that tree, I started having flowers on my mind as I kept seeing them along the hillsides in the woodland. So from here, I went actually on this little hillside right next to the Bergamo Center, as you can see off in the distance, cleared past all the bare trees. And so I had on my mind different kinds of spring ephemeral flowers and different kind of flowering plants that I may see. And it's actually from this viewpoint that I actually saw Mayapple and cut-leaved toothwort. So I decided to photograph them.
Alright, so I found my next photographic kind of interest here. at the Bergamo Center in the Nature Preserve. It's actually this little flowering kind of plant species that kind of grows out of the ground from April to July. It's called Mayapple, and it kind of resembles, once it's fully sprouted and the leaves outstretched, it kind of resembles a little bit of like a treetop umbrella. And it's just this really small, as you can see, it's about the size, about the length of my hand really. They don't grow too big at all, but they definitely cover the woodland here. I think at the moment I'm really kind of thinking about doing some wide angle, get some nice kind of area of expanse to really show this one in particular right here that has the sunlight right on it, right next to me here, but also just the different ones in the foreground and background, like right beside it. And then from there, I might even try some macro ones, but like I said, I feel like I'm much more preferring the wide angle perspective, at least in this case, especially with this kind of rolling hill that takes you clear out to the background of what would be the image, the potential image really. But yeah, I'm going to try this out, experiment, work some angles, and like I said, try the wide angle versus the macro kind of focal length perspective, and hopefully the photos turn out pretty well. Alright, so quite literally on the other side of the trail from the Mayapples on this side behind me here, I found another spring ephemeral flower. This one's called purple cress, and it's a new one I've never seen before, which is pretty awesome. It's a nice, really, really small, kind of bell-shaped bloom. Kind of reminds me of Virginia bluebells, honestly. But it's a nice small little sprout here. Looks like it's not really fully, looks like bloomed yet, really. It makes these kind of gorgeous small white flowering little blooms there, but I'm still going to photograph it anyways. There's a little bit of minimal wind going on. It's very negligible, but it's just enough to kind of sway it a little bit, so I'm going to up my shutter speed a little bit. But it looks like at the moment actually I've at 25th of a second, which is pretty slow, but that's okay. And then I also want to emphasize the stem and the leaves, and include that detail into the photograph in this case, and into the composition. So I put my aperture about f10. I feel like that's going to be a nice little setup there, and then ISO 800 just to get a nice well exposed photo, all the while paying attention to the histogram as well. I also been having the cover and block, in this case using my hat, just a little bit of do-it-yourself, and I've been using that to block out the sunlight that's peering overhead right behind the flowers, and so it makes a nice diffused lighting situation for this really small cropped in image that I'm trying to take here. You see, because the problem is if I just let the light do what it is doing at the moment, which is casting these harsh shadows and lots of blown out highlights, at least from the images I took before I started blocking the sun, then yeah, it just looks very unattractive and all that, and there's lots of bright spotty highlights, especially in the background. And even if you drop out the focus and make a really shallow depth of field, it still just makes all these bright white splotches, and they come up and appear as blinkies, as they call them on the camera LCD when you look at the image playback, and that's blinking to show you that it's overexposed there. So for that reason I've been using the hat. It's just big enough that can cover up these small spring ephemeral flowers I've been photographing lately here in early spring, and it makes it just really a nice, more effective photo. Like I said, no blown out highlights, and it looks very nice, soft diffused, and it's almost kind of like a little bit of a trick, because then it's like I could, tell someone like, hey, I actually photographed that right pretty much late morning here in the middle of the day, and it's like hard to tell it even was taken during sunny days like this, because it just looks so nice and much more cleaner looking image there. But yeah, I've been really enjoying my time here at Mount St. John, so I'm going to continue along the trail, see what else I can find today, but spring ephemeral flowers or otherwise.
One of my favorite aspects of photographing vertically driven plants like this is to really get down to their eye level and photograph it from a macro perspective. So in the case of these Mayapples, I just simply got down, hunched down really with my tripod as low as I could get to the ground, and photographed them accordingly on their eye level there. And I feel like it just really puts you in perspective of the way these plants live their lives. And then same with the toothwort, I really got down low and just really diffused the light and made these really nice images that you wouldn't get otherwise from standing up. So from here, I just kept on going along the trail. I was more than halfway done with the nature preserve here, but I was still finding trails and many places to hike on.
Alright, so here's a little section of the nature preserve here that I checked out pretty early in the morning. This is actually the first trail I went along, but I was so single-mindedly focused on getting a sunrise composition over the rolling hill over there in the prairie. But anyways, I came back now, since it's kind of midday. I feel like I could work the subject a little bit better now, but I have Marsh Marigold here in the woodland fen. These are very beautiful blooming yellow flowers that typically flower from about April to August, depending on the latitude and longitude and your region. They could even be outside of that kind of window and range of months. But they're very beautiful, small yellow flowers that I would normally mistake. Sorry, I'm like trying to balance myself. There's a lot going on here, but they're normally flowers that would I thought at first were buttercups, just because they're small yellow, several petaled flowers. But then I instantly kind of corrected myself because I remember the habitat that's in this kind of wet woods and this smallish fen space right here. And so once I got a closer inspection, I identified it, and I was like, yeah, these are definitely marsh marigolds, which makes sense for the time of year, of course. But yeah, they're very nice. They grow in these kind of nice clumps and clusters that are very beautiful. And I've just been picking apart my favorite ones, or at least the ones in their best position, from where I'm trying to balance myself on these tree branches. And but getting some with singular, just single flowers, and then some that are in kind of groups of 3 and whatnot. All of them in macro style. I feel like that's the best case for this. And shooting pretty much from the top down. I'm also doing kind of sort of side view images here that kind of obscure the ones behind it, or the leaves that grow from them and grow around them as well. But yeah, it's very beautiful. The sunlight actually hasn't been too big of a problem with this specific location in the preserve, but so I really haven't had to really use my hat as a sunshade or lens hood to really block out any of the background and darken and make shadow areas pretty much. But there's been a couple times I had to use it, but it's been working out pretty well. And I even took an image of a top-down single one, completely in shade with my back against the sun, so blocking out all the pretty much light from what would normally be the sunlight and the natural light ahead. But instead I'm just using pretty much upping, or rather slowing down my shutter and letting in more light to make a much more brighter exposure that way. So yeah, it just gives me more control and flexibility when creating images here. So from here, I think there's one more little spot I'm going to check out, and that's some Virginia bluebells, and then I'll probably call it quits for the day. But it's been very successful so far, and I'm really loving this place for my first visit here. So we'll see you in a few. Alright, so I guess my eyes didn't really adjust too well in the dark, or maybe, like I said, just because I was in a hurry trying to get to the prairie up top on the hill, over the hill there. At least hiking through the woodland here in the dark. And I guess I didn't see the bluebells really, didn't catch my attention. They weren't really fully, developed or whatever. They don't really have that bell shape quite yet, but they're definitely lots of them, flowering, leafing. And then there's also a little buds on them, each one of them going from pink to blue. They start out in nice little pink buds, and then once they kind of sprout over to the bell shape, that's when they get their blue, kind of darker blue color. So I think I'm gonna, sometimes you gotta just like step back and just not photograph something, but I'm not really feeling too compelled to photograph them at the moment. It's a very beautiful little display here, just lining the trail on both sides of me, at least for a good, I'd say about 100 yards here, along the woodland trail here. But yeah, and plus the sunlight's very, very harsh, and I feel like I tried working the scene a little bit, or working the subject at different angles, at least in a macro perspective, and the sunlight, it's just And plus the big leaves are also just really overshadowing the buds, which is obviously the central focus point that I'd be going for with these flowers here, these ephemerals. So yeah, I'm gonna probably sit this one out. I'll take a few more test shots and just kind of see how, if I like them at all or whatever. But I feel like I'm gonna wrap up the video here. Also did a few, let me also say, now I'm thinking about it, I did see a few more ephemerals, some kind of smooth gentians, some violet flowers, typical. The other ones I've photographed previous years are already this season, like Bloodroot, Virginia spring beauties, and quite a few more. So yeah, it's just been a great day out. April and May are always what I say is some of the busiest times of year for nature photography, simply because it's like attacking on all fronts. You got, you know, migrating birds like warblers, neotropical migrants, and then you got spring wildflowers, starting with all these ephemeral different flowers, and there's plenty of those on their own. And then there's the ones that kind of come later when there's the tree canopy grows and gets its leaves. And yeah, there's just so much to see this time of year. You also got waterfalls in spring when the water flows and, you know, ice and snow melts, and it creates all these waterways in different places you couldn't even imagine. But yeah, spring is a very exciting time of year. It's definitely becoming my favorite, simply alone for all these reasons, being in nature photography like I am. So yeah, really enjoyed my time here at Marianist Nature Preserve. But thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, make sure to get out here. Thank you.